Space Marines! The Adeptus Astartes of the Imperium of Man are the indomitable might of humanity made manifest. For when we could not overcome the horrors of Black Night, we made demigods who could. Indestructible, implacable, and uncorruptible. Yet, we know this to be false. For who are demigods before true deities? Yet as per human nature, we only recognize what we know, which is why our end often comes from the shadows. And this shadow comes from the warp. For what if I told you that we are just one misstep, one donation of DNA away from the entirety of the Adeptus Astartes being enslaved? Yet not by the foulness of the ruinous powers, but by a far older and more accomplished foe in a much, much more insidious fashion. For the great devourer hath come, and it hungers. Alright, so before I can get into explaining the crux of this theory proper, I gotta lay out some groundwork. To fully grasp this theory, we need to understand the creation of a Space Marine and the creation of a Genestealer Cult. First, we'll start off with the Space Marines. The creation of a Space Marine can fall into three main categories. First being the recruitment, second being the training and the implantation, and the third being the finalization and induction into the company proper. The most important thing when it comes to Space Marines is the recruitment. Each single Space Marine chapter has its own form and way of recruitment, in accordance with its own traditions as well as its own chapter history. But generally speaking, the more warlike and difficult a world is, the better for recruitment grounds it will be. Taken from the Space Marine 9th edition Codex. Many chapters maintain feral and death worlds, possessive of tenacious and hardy populations, people who endure bitter struggles for survival on a daily basis. On these worlds, life itself is near impossible, a test that only the toughest could survive, and the Space Marines seek in their aspirants the qualities required to succeed in these conditions, where they are forced to by high casualties, or gene depletion of their homeworld, or simply choose to. Many chapters recruit from more than one world. Some demand aspirants from a world they've saved from invasion. Others have ancient ties with neighboring worlds, which provide aspirants on a regular basis, though some might call this a dilution of the recruitment pool. Many chapters that do this heavily indoctrinate their outsider recruits, so that soon they are virtually indistinguishable, culturally and in outlook, from a locally recruited aspirant. Now, recruitment here is absolutely intense. Again, it depends specifically on the chapter itself, but intense scrutiny by both the chaplaincy, apothecarion, and librarium are often introduced. The apothecarion is the one that is 100% necessary, because you have to make sure that the genetic compatibility of the particular individual matches up with the gene seed. If not, you get gene seed rejection, which is very bad, because in some cases that could lead to the gene seed being wasted, which is completely and utterly unacceptable in any Space Marine culture. Even the Chaos blokes don't like that. Thus, it's job of the apothecarion to ensure that the genetic code of the particular aspirant is compatible with the gene seed. They also make sure there's no defects, anything weird, or anything that could potentially show corruption or havoc. Basically, they have one job, and that's to make sure that if they choose to put this gene seed in this aspirant, it will accept it and it will not cause anything negative. Next up then, we have the chaplaincy. The chaplaincy are there to test the spiritual purity of an aspirant. Basically, they want to make sure that the chap they're recruiting is a good suit for that chapter. Now, yes, there is a lot of indoctrination that goes into it, both psychological and mental. It's a lot easier to start someone off on a good route than have to force them down their own path. For example, you don't want somebody stone cold and callous becoming a salamander. In the same vein, you don't want someone warm and full of heart becoming an Iron Hands. Whilst technically you could make them that way, it's not going to be as good if those two just switch their aspirants around. Now, generally speaking, those are the two main ones, but in some cases, the librarium can also be used. Now, the librarium is only looked over if, for whatever reason, they believe that some type of psychic nonsense is at play. A prime example. If a world was saved from, let's say, a Xinjiang cult, the chapter recruiting from said world might have the librarians go over each and every one of them to see if there's any chaos corruption. Or if you're someone like the Grey Knights or the Exorcists who deal a lot with psychic stuff, it may just be part of your ritual. But then of course there are other chapters like the Silver Skulls and the Blood Ravens who make great use of librarians as is. So it's not out of the realm possibility to say that they are part of the recruitment process. But regardless of who, how, what, when, where, or why, this process is beyond difficult, and it is absolutely brutal. Very, very few men become Space Marines. Taken from In the Grim Darkness. All 16 boys occupy the transit hold, 4 short of the total capacity. There hadn't been a full graduation class ever, so they said. Decimus couldn't quite trust the dormitory rumors in the battle scolum. He was wise not to. Credulous boys rarely made the grade, but that one rang truer than most. Yearly intake at the Ocular Scolum was 15,000 boys. Some of them would die there, but though the regime took care of its charges, The curriculum was hard, very hard, and the boys were pushed to the limits of their capabilities. Of the thousands that graduated every year, most could look forward to positions of responsibility in Ultramar, generals of the Ultramarian Auxilia, civilian administrators of the highest grade, diplomats and ambassadors both, some of who just might one day tread the poison soils of terror. Engineers, governors, judge, economists, cardinals, and potents of every degree, up to 20 from that weighty cohort, might, just might, make it into the Ultramarine Space Marine Legion. It was never the full 20 though. Not ever. Now while yes, this is indeed taken from the Legion days, and the Legions had far more difficult recruitment grades than the Standard Space Marine chapter, but even then Dante confirms out of the 5,000 to 6,000, only approximately below 10% of that qualified to even attempt Space Marine procedures. So basically, Space Marine acceptance rate is most likely going to be below 10% at the best of times. The scrutiny is beyond comparison. The trials are terrible and deadly in equal measure. To become a Space Marine is not a simple task. To become a Space Marine is not an easy task. And most importantly for our topic today, to become a Space Marine is not a universal task. It is no small thing to say that those who will qualify in one chapter would not qualify in another. Some Space Marine care about more things than others, and some of them have extra articles that must be developed in the course of their training. Two most examples that we have are the Space Wolves and the Blood Angels. The Space Wolves, for example, don't really put that much emphasis on the whole traditional aspect of professionalism. They don't really follow the necessary treaties. They have their own way of doing things, and depending on the particular aspect in question, if the particular Wolf Priest deems him alright, he's alright. It's much more a case of something as a feeling, when you compare it especially to something like akin to the Ultramarines, which have a very strict and organized way of taking in and training recruits. And to the Blood Angels, well, they have a unique phase to them. Each installation of the G-heated organ is divided into different phases. Generally speaking, each organ is its own phase, with the exception of the new Primaris organs, which are all done in phase 3. With the Blood Angels, however, after everything has all been said and done, they introduce the final phase, that being insanguination, where they are submerged in a coffin of blood for over a year. This is something exclusive to the Blood Angels, and if anyone else tried this, it would end in abject and utter failure, but it is something that is specifically unique to their particular gene seed, meaning that when the Red Priests of the Blood go looking for their potential neophytes and recruits, this is a concern that they have above all else. But after all the implementation has been done, and after all the indoctrination has taken place, the Space Marine will graduate to a full Battle Brother and become an integrated part of the chapter. A process that takes several years, well over a decade in most cases, and in some cases there are records of it being nearly 2 decades. But again, for each legion and each chapter, it is extremely unique and specific. Yet from the demigods of humanity to the abhorrent princes of the Great Devourer, let us take a look at now the insidious creation of a Genestealer. Genestealers are a vanguard organism of the Hivemind. When they were first introduced, they were used exclusively as elite shock troops. Yet while they had good speed and incredibly high damage, they lacked a little bit in the durability. And eventually, however, after this, the Hivemind would find a new and more better use for them. Each and every Genestealer patriarch would be sent forth into a random world, where they would find and begin developing a Genestealer cult, essentially preparing the world for the coming of the Nids. By the creation and spreading of many different human hybrids, when the Tyranids would become close to the planet, the Genestealers would raise up in a violent revolt, destroying the world from the inside out, allowing the Tyranids to devour the world wholly and utterly with zero resistance, including those who gave unto them this world. Those poor fellows refer to them as the Star Gods, or more heretically, the Four-Armed Emperor. Taken from the 8th edition Genestealer Codex. As with all their void-born kin, the Genestealer is inhumanely patient, able to subsist on very little subsistence and to wait decades if necessary before making its move. When a Genestealer reaches a world ripe for infection, it will immediately go into hiding, clambering into the dark and forgotten spaces, and lurking unseen as it prepares to spread its influence. Once it is certain of being able to acquire victims while still remaining undetected, it will stalk the fringes of society in search of prey, emerging only on the blackest of nights to snatch away the unwary with its steel-hard, muscular limbs. Those who fall prey to the Genestealer's silent ambushes are not torn apart for later consumption, as with most victims of the Tyranid race. Instead, they are put into a thrall-like state by its hypnotic gaze. Selected victims are then impregnated with a portion of the creature's own genetic pattern, delivered under the skin via a ribbed tube, called the ovipositor. This process is known through the cult as the Genestealer's Kiss. Though it bestows a portion of the Xenos' entity's strength and longevity, the implantation is as cold and uncaring as a blade in the back. The resultant parasitism alters the body until the Xenos taint runs throughout. It also alters the mind, forcing the victim to revere the Genestealer Patriarch as a messianic figure, an idol of a new, obsessive religion. Whenever a Genestealer implants a victim, it condemns their bloodline forever. The hybrid offspring are grotesque and misshapen creatures, who are varied in form as they are hideous to behold. Certain features are common, such as bulbous craniums and snarling needle-toothed maws, a pair of extra rims ending in viciously sharp claws, tongue-trailed spikes, and mottled purplish skin. These initial hybrids are known as the first generation. From here, the lifespan of a cult is pretty simple to understand. A Genestealer will be deployed by the Hivemind. The Patriarch will then find its way into a world, literally any world, but we'll get into that a little later. From then, the Patriarch will simply find a nice quiet corner and slowly abduct people in the middle of the night. From there, it will begin infecting them with the Genestealer Kiss. These multiple people will then come together and then reproduce, resulting in the first generation of Genestealers. These are known as hybrids. From there, the Genestealer hybrids will then hypnotize new members to join the cult, again and again and again. From this reproduction, we will then get a second generation. These still are aberrant in their appearance, having multiple arms and being hunched over and stooped. Yet unlike the initial forms, they are able to understand and operate in a slight weird manner, allowing them to operate on the fringes of human society, rather than the direct shadows. From here, it will continue again, until we get to the third generation. These could be passed off as some type of offshoot of humanity, noted for their purplish skin, as well as the weird ridges on their forehead. Though in some cases, there may be a hidden limb underneath their clothing. From here, however, they will continue to breed, until we get to the fourth generation. Completely, utterly perfect. Near genetically identical to humanity. Not only is the genetic identity nearly complete with that of humanity, by the fourth generation, many of the people here have become charismatic agents, often with psychic abilities. They often rise to positions of power, because there's something about them that you just can't help but love. From here, the fourth generation cultists can so-called breed true, which is the whole point of this. But they do not give birth to untainted humans, but instead, to the pure strain Genestealers, said to be a near one-to-one identical copy of the original Patriarch. But incredibly importantly, these now possess the genetic material of all their parent generations. It's a Genestealer, yes, but a unique strain, pure to that homeworld. And that is the completion of the cycle. For by this point, it is said that the curse of the Genestealer has taken hold of the bloodline completely. What this means is that by the time the fifth cycle has happened, the DNA is forever changed. There is no going back. There's no minor alterations, there's no minor deviances. The Genestealer DNA and its host DNA have irrefutably become one, possessing every aspect of both. And then from here, they'll just continue the cycle, again and again and again and again, all in secrecy, until the Hivemind comes close. When that happens, there will be a psychic wave sent out that will activate the latency within the Patriarch. From there, the order will go out, and Salvation Day, as some have called it, will begin in earnest. The Genestealer Cults will then rise up in a violent rebellion and overthrow the local population and the local governmental rule, and then wait. Simply wait, until the Tyranid bioship appears in the sky above, and they are all consumed. It is said that as the humans are consumed, the true reality of it all sets in, for as the Genestealer Patriarch is reabsorbed back into the Hivemind, the psychic link that was established via the Genestealer's Kiss is gone, and as they fall into a vat of organic acid, the betrayers of humanity realize their treachery and are said to cry out in abject horror and terror. Alright, so now we know how to make a Space Marine, and we know how to make a Genestealer Cult. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the crux of it. A Genestealer Cult is designed specifically to take human DNA and incorporate it into the Genestealer DNA. From there, said DNA is then taken and then placed back into the Tyranid Hivemind's DNA pool to be used however it wishes for the Norn Queens to create their own unique type of Xenos. So what if Space Marine DNA was corrupted by Genestealers and given back to the Hivemind? Now, I'm sure that you have several questions and probably a few curses to throw at me, but let's break this down one step at a time. Firstly, Is the Hivemind even capable of doing something like that? Like, surely Space Marine DNA would have some type of safeguards. And the truth is, yes, it has plenty of safeguards. But the fact of the matter is, the Hivemind just doesn't care. And this is not new lore. This is something that has existed for a long time. All the way back in 3rd edition, for example, taken from the Tyranid Codex. Over time, the enemies of the Tyranids have learned to target the Synapse creatures in their swarms, denying them critical influence of the Hivemind in battle. The Tyrant Guard appear to have been bioengineered specifically to form bodyguards to protect these creatures, and their resistance to injury is nigh amazing. Some among the Magos biologists even whisper that the Tyrant Guard consists of DNA from Space Marine chapters lost to the Tyranids, although such blasphemy is hard to countenance. And it's not just Space Marines, mind you, who are susceptible to this. In the same edition, Pyrovores and Pyrophores are said to be taken from Ork DNA, whilst Zoanthropes, the psychically active of the Tyranids, are said to be taken from the Eldar specifically. Basically, whatever DNA the Hivemind gets, if it thinks there's a way for it to use it, it will use it. Okay then, Brad, but that's the Hivemind. Surely a Genestealer can't do that. Surely it has its limits. Again, you may think that, but in reality, it doesn't. Again, taken from the 8th edition Codex. The pure strain Genestealer can, through the modus of implantation via its ovipositor, place its germ seed in any creature of the requisite autonomy to later sire a hybrid. Over the countless centuries since their induction into the stellar realm of mankind, these extragalactic predators have started colonies within the races of the Orks, the Greet, the Kroot, the Eldari, the Talarin, and even the Tau. They tend to choose ambulatory species of sufficient intelligence to be space capable, hence to spread their curse far and wide, and we usually get one whose population is dense enough to keep such a spread secret, until it is too late for the infection to be overcome. The Orks have proven to be troublesome as hosts, but they can sense wrongness in those infected, something that disturbs the strange gestalt consciousness of the green-skinned mind. The Kroot are much the same, though their avoidance of infected members of their society comes from their ability to taste pheromones, and the wisdom of the Shapers who guide the people's evolution. The Eldari have such lengthy gestation cycles that they are simply not viable as biological hosts. Furthermore, their psychic abilities are so well developed and in-tuned, they can often see the shadow of the curse even before it can manifest, and thus avoid it accordingly. The Tau have a connection with their ethereal caste that makes its infection by Genestealers very difficult. Only humanity, so manifold and unruly in its civilizations, has yet provided an ideal host. Genestealers can and will infect anything. They have the ability to do anything, and they've done it with literally pretty much everyone in this galaxy. The only reason why we see it in humanity so common is because we don't really have a good way of telling them to fuck off. Now I imagine that this time a lot of you may be yelling and raving about, Brad, hold on, it doesn't matter even if they can do all this. Surely during the screening process the Space Marines would realize what's going up. I mean, you said it yourself in the exoscript. The Eldar can detect them via psychic stuff, so why can't we? Firstly, when it's talking about the Eldar, it says much before the curse can even manifest. Specifically, they use the word shadow, which means that this is more likely a case they detect the Genestealer itself while it's still connected to the shadow of the warp. It's not a case of them detecting the infestation once it sets in, it's a case of them detecting the infestation while it's still on the way to them. Secondly, they are significantly more powerful than us in regards to that type of psychic attunement. Even Space Marine librarians would struggle with something like that. But that is not the main reason why Space Marine librarians would not be able to detect them. Genestealers are not connected to the Hivemind, and that is the big thing that people seem to forget. When Genestealers are sent out, they are doing their own thing on their own way, due to them being literally in some cases thousands upon tens of thousands of billions of kilometers away from the Hivemind. They cannot be connected. They have to be detached, meaning that they no longer have the shadow in the warp, that psychic presence that is the Tyranids. They instead have their own unique psychic presence, the same one that they use to ensnare their hosts, which is why every single Genestealer cult is so different from one another. In fact, we have examples of Genestealers fighting each other, such as on the world of Yamal, where Genestealers did in fact fight with each other because they were from two different Genestealer patriarchs. They are different, they are very unique, and they do their own thing. But why is that so important, you ask? That's because humanity knows what the shadow in the warp is. They know what that warp presence is. They don't know what every single different patriarch warp presence is. And again, some of you may be saying, oh but Brad, wouldn't they notice it? But that's the thing. They're not looking for that though. Remember, Space Marine librarians are not necessary to the process. The only one truly necessary is of course the apothecary. So if a Space Marine librarian is looking for taints, it's looking for taints that it's been taught about, Chaos being the most obvious one, and maybe the Tyranid Hivemind. If it notices something that isn't either of those two things, it's not going to think it's anything different, especially when we consider that that particular psychic presence is made to be absolutely secret. Genestealers are meant to be hidden. They're meant to be secretive. And even then, each person's psychic presence is completely unique in the warp. And remember, when you become part of the cult, that Genestealer then takes its psychic presence and puts it on you. Meaning that to that librarian, that could just be your unique psychic presence. Again, if it doesn't know what it's looking for, how do you expect him to find it? Okay, Brad, I get all this, but why on earth would the Hivemind be bothered with Space Marines? And that's because the Hivemind wants us dead. It hates us. The Hivemind has the capability to do literally anything revolving to genetic manipulation, and it wants us dead. Meaning that why wouldn't it take our greatest weapons and turn them against us? And we've seen the Hivemind firsthand with its hatred with humanity, taken from the devastation of Baal. The biologians held the Hivemind only to be a complicated animal, a supreme predator driven by a devastatingly powerful reactive mind. Nevertheless, devoid of soul, it was an automaton, so they said, unfeeling. It was as unaware of what it did as the wit is unaware of the cliff whose face it scours away, grain by grain. The Hivemind was biological mechanics writ large, mind from mindfulness. The Imperial scholars were wrong. The Hivemind knew, the Hivemind thought, it felt, it hated, and it desired. Its emotions were utterly alien. Cocktails of feelings not even the subtle Eldari might decipher. Its emotions were oceans to the puddles of a man's feelings. They were inconceivable to humanity, or they were too big to perceive. The Hivemind looked out of its innumerable eyes towards the red dull star of Baal. It apprehended that this was the hive of warriors that had hurt it so grievously, who had burned its feeding grounds and scattered its fleets. It hated the red prey, and it coveted them. Tasting their exotic genomes, it had seen potential for new and terrible war beasts. And so it drew its plans and set in motion trillions upon trillions of bodies towards the consumption of the creatures in red metal, so that their secrets might be plundered and re-employed in the sating of the Hivemind's endless hunger. This was deliberate. This was considered, and this was done in malice. So judging from all this, we indeed know that this is possible, but then that begs the question, would it ever happen? And that is where I kinda got y'all, because it has happened twice. We have two confirmed examples of Genestealers infecting Space Marines, their serfs, and their gene seed. The first example we have is of the Death Spectres. The Death Spectres are a unique chapter hailing from the Raven God, said to be founded during the 13th founding. We know for a fact that they were infected by a Genestealer cult, said to originated from one of their so-called breeding worlds. By the way, this is the time where I put a little thing out here. This is some very odd lore. And by odd, I mean it's kind of like the Demon Kalaba lore. It's like, I get it, but this really didn't need to be a thing. But it's not as bad. Basically, the Death Spectres are in the Ghoul Stars. The Ghoul Stars are heavily depopulated. So what they do is that when they find someone of good genetic stock, they grab them and they put them on a so-called breeding world. And their whole job is to breed aspirants for the chapter. We learn about this as well as the Genestealer nonsense from the short story Flayed. But given everything I've said about that lore, I'm not going to cover that extra script because that's not my kink. It's elves and thigh-highs if you're wondering. But lucky for the Death Spectres, they were able to catch it relatively early, before the first cycle had concluded. Thus, they were able to destroy them and expunge them completely and utterly, scouring the entirety of the chapter and everyone relating to them. That, however, could not be said for our second chapter, the Scythes of the Emperor. Not to be confused with the Emperor Scythes. Yes, those are indeed two very different chapters. Why? I don't know. Don't ask me. Literally GW, I get it, but that's so fucking dumb. Originally a hallowed and veteran company, hailing from the Ultramarines Legion, the 199th Agata Company would eventually become the third founding chapter, known as the Scythes of the Emperor. They would serve dutifully upon the world of Sotha, until, however, they would be scoured by the Tyranid menace of High Fleet Kraken. Yet the truth of what exactly had happened, and how such a mighty chapter could have fallen, would only be revealed many a time later, when Archmagos Belisarius Call would return to that world, now long a dead husk, searching for his own clues, but what he would find would change the Scythes of the Emperor forever. Two Space Marines stood guard over a suspension casket, Through the viewing plate was darkness. The Emperor alone knew how Hadrios had gotten it aboard. Do you want to see it? No. We should kill it. Not yet. It will be useful. The light keeps it dormant. It's not a full-blood strain, but the hybrids share many characteristics with the parent creatures. Genestealers have an affinity with the shadows. Why have you brought this aboard, after what the Tyranids did to Sotha? How could you? I had to. We need it. Do we? Said Thracian. The situation had made him ready to fight. There was something wrong. The cleanness of Hadros' armor had struck him when they met a few hours ago. It did so again. Was he involved in the battle at all? Already, Thracian was calculating how he could fight his way free. Why don't I know you, Hadrios? He looked at the warrior carefully, wishing that he could remove Hadrios' faceplate and see the man beneath. There are less than 1,000 of us. Only that many, and yet, I don't know you. I don't know any of you. He turned, taking in the Space Marines guarding the casket. Our identities were hidden intentionally, though I assure you, I am a loyal servant of the sires of the Emperor. It is time to initiate you into the deeper mysteries of the chapter. We are good sons of Ultramar, Gilliman's progeny. We don't have any secrets. All chapters have secrets. Hadrios rested his hand on the casket, some of which have only become apparent to me recently. You didn't know Captain Agras very well. He was my battle captain. But did you know him? Did you know him as a man? Or as a friend? Thracian's first instinct was to say yes, and accept for himself that that was the truth. It was not the truth. He looked at the casket again. He was finding it hard to think. Some force emanated from it, clouding his mind. No, I don't think anyone knew him. He was private. Hadrios nodded again, so calm in the face of this awful thing. Thracian felt himself teeter on the brink of madness. His hybrid came from Sotha itself. Argus selected me to be part of his inner conclave, a position sanctified by the chaplaincy and the apothecarion, invested with great responsibility, great secrecy. We are the tool of the chaplaincy, independent from the chapter master's control. There were 5 of us. We 3 remain. He gestured to the other 2 Space Marines. Our task was to keep our chapter's holdings pure. Thracian stared at the casket. Sotha was infected? That's impossible. Evidence suggests otherwise. We watched them for millennia. They were our families, our brothers in arms. I cannot believe it. The sensation from the casket increased, as did his disbelief. And yet, they turned on us. That is not true. They were devoured. You were there. No one came to help you, did they? And you're saying that both the chaplaincy and the apothecaries knew this? They knew it. They were trying to root out the rot. That is why we had to be so secretive. It only takes one captain, one Genestealer to corrupt a world, even a world that is home to the Adeptus Astartes. Sotha. Thracian felt a great agitation and began to pace. The uprising on Braca Dominus, and the other instances of civil unrest before the fleet hit the League. The whole of the Sothorian League was thick with Genestealers. Our world was directly targeted, brother, to neutralize us. There was a cult on Sotha, right underneath our noses. No, that cannot be true. We would have known. But you didn't know. Why do you think that is? Hadrios continued with relentless logic. Were we negligent, or were we prevented from seeing? Did it not strike you how easily Sotha fell? The confusion, the lack of coordination in the defense, the failure of the boiled shields and orbital guns so early in the battle. Then why are you operating outside Throkak's authority? As I told you, at the behest of the chaplaincy. What do you think about Throkas coming here, to Miriel Prime, making a stand against all sense, when we should flee and consolidate? That is the chapter master's judgment, and we are honor-bound to obey him. You think his judgment bad nonetheless? There are strong links between the chapter and the Sothon government. The chapter master has always been advised by the elders of Sotha. He still is, by those that remain. Why do you think they managed to survive? Why do you think they suggested this place? Have you seen Throka? I was hoping to bring this news to him. I feared what I might discover. Alas, my fears were borne out when he refused to see me. He is panicking. Such a defeat is enough to affect even us. He falls back on tradition when he should be decisive. Careful what you insinuate, brother. Isn't it obvious? The scythes of the Emperor are compromised. The Hivemind beat us. because it has us. It used our concern for our countrymen as a weapon. The infiltrators are still here, among the fleet, working against the Imperium. Thraka cannot see it. Then we should execute the Council of Elders, every single one of them. It is not easy. If we act, they will strike. There are too few of the chapter left. Our serfs are dead. They were screened through thoroughly, but who knows how many of them hid amongst our void ship crews, or among the hundreds of thousands of refugees that would follow our retreat. Besides, would you abandon our traditions and indiscriminately massacre all those we hold dear? We were here to protect humanity, not slaughter it. There are subtler ways. That is the purpose of my small brotherhood. Help me, brother captain, to continue my sacred task and purge the taint from our people and our brothers. Even through his helm, Thracian could feel the other man's eyes locked onto his own. What do you propose we do? I shall continue the work of Argus and the inner conclave. I will scour the refugee vessels coming to us here. I will vet those recruited to replenish our chapter serfs. The gene seed brought to Muriel must also be checked. What are you suggesting? It may have been tampered with in the confusion. That's a ridiculous suggestion. Is it? Listen to me, Thracian. We are the guarantors of the chapter's future. Tharkia leads us all to our deaths here. As soon as we can, under whatever pretext, we must leave, and we must not return. Thracian stared at Hadrios. He did not wish to agree. He refused to believe that his brothers and sisters of the common blood were tainted. The sense of foreboding from the casket pushed at him, and there was so much light. From that exoscript, it all but confirms that the entirety of the chapter, serfs, people of Sotha, and even some space marines, were infected by the Genestealer curse. And this belief was held by the remaining firstborn of the size of the Emperor, but they would refuse to use their own gene seed, nor would they refuse to be replenished. They instead welcomed their new Primaris brothers, and decreed that they would be the loss of the firstborn. Everything, armaments, serfs, and most importantly gene seed, would be of pure Primaris stock. But the size of the Emperor would continue, but any risk of Genestealer taint that lay within the first founding brothers had to be purged. And as I mentioned before, this is far from uncommon. This is a map taken from the 8th edition codex. Anywhere with a black circle means that there are signs of Genestealers. Anywhere with a red dot means there's a full-on cult in brew. You'll notice that there are many worlds that are vital to the Imperium. Krieg, Baal, Fenris, The Rock, Nocturne, Kalth, Ultramar, Terra, Griffon 4, Agrippina, Cadia. Everywhere. Genestealers are everywhere. They can infect anyone and anything. Not even the Adeptus Custodes in their might can fully eradicate them, because all it takes is one single infected to spread the disease, and there is no cure for the Genestealer's kiss. But before we get into the theory proper, let's cover everything we've established. Firstly, the recruitment of Space Marines is not bulletproof. The first and the main thing that a Space Marine is made for is to see if the gene seed is compatible with the aspirant. That's why the Apothecarion is 100% dedicated to it. Chaplaincies are usually but not always also added, but that's a test to see if the mentality and the emotional capacity of the particular aspirant matches the nature and culture of the chapter. And in regards to the librarians, few chapters include the librarius when it comes to recruitment of new recruits. And when they do, they are looking for things that they know, chaos, the hive mind. They are not looking for the individual and unique psychic pattern and warp presence of a random Genestealer patriarch. And finally, and most damningly, when it comes to the Apothecarion, wouldn't they notice a difference? No, they wouldn't. Because by the time of the 4th phase of the generation, the DNA is identical. It is indistinguishable. And as we've seen, it can and will happen. Second, Genestealers are nigh unexterminatable. They can thrive anywhere and take over anyone. They're on Terra, for God's sakes. They can take over Space Marines. They can take over anyone and anything. Orks, Eldar, Tau, anyone and everyone. Genestealers can and will go everywhere. They have gone. They are everywhere. And they only have one goal: to reproduce. Number 3. The hive mind can manipulate Space Marine DNA. We know that for a fact with the creation of the Tyrant God. We also know that it wants more Space Marine DNA because it hates us. It wants to destroy us all. It is malicious. And if it's malicious, And if it hates us, why on earth would it show any bit of restraint? It will do anything it can to devour us. Anything at all. It is unknowable hatred. Fourth and finally, we have two separate examples of Genestealers infecting Space Marines, but more importantly, their very gene seed. It has happened. Not once, but twice, and probably more times than that. Remember, on that map, how many worlds were chapter planet worlds? And how many of those had full-on cults? But before I do the final reveal and then the conclusion of this theory, there is something I would like to point out to all of you. And that is something that a lot of the newer fans of 40k have kind of forgotten. And that is the idea that no one is safe. One of the biggest critiques of the recent writings of GW is that nothing feels like it makes sense anymore. The Imperium is dying, the Imperium will go through a big struggle, they'll come out alright and everything will be okay. No one will die, everything will be alright, it's a moot point. Nothing ever really happens. That's why the breaking of Acadia was such a massive thing. But that is only a very recent development. And GW seems to be walking back on that ever so slightly. And I think it's best for the hobby that they do, because back in the day, nobody was safe. It didn't matter who it was, be it Marnius Calgar or Mr. Gilliman himself. In the grim darkness of the far future, it doesn't matter who the hell you are, you can and you will die. Anything can happen. Craft worlds can be snuffed out, entire chapters can be wiped out, Primos can die, the Emperor is on the golden throne basically dead. Anything can and will happen. Just because it doesn't match with our own ideals and beliefs of what is going to happen, of what will happen, of that isn't something GW will do, or that GW will never let that happen. That's our belief. And our belief comes from a place of complacency, but a complacency is like a glass floor. All it takes is one misstep, and it all comes shattering down. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I can reveal to you how the Hivemind is this close to getting every single Space Marine under its thrall. And that is Gene Seed. Space Marines can be infected. Gene Seed can also be infected thusly, that we know for a fact. The problem is, Space Marines do not reproduce, meaning that they will only ever be at that first generation, the initial generation. But here's the kicker, the Space Marines cannot reproduce the genetic material. The Hivemind, however, can. The Hivemind can and will do anything it wants when it comes to genetic material. Meaning that if the Hivemind were to get itself onto hands of infected Space Marine gene seed with the Genestealer taint, that means that it could genetically manipulate it and reproduce it time and time and time again until it successfully reaches that fourth generation and becomes true, permanent Genestealer Space Marine hybrid gene seed. How would that happen? Any way it could. Perhaps the Hivemind creates a bunch of Space Marine hybrids, implanted into the walls of a bioship. Perhaps it keeps on injecting them with the gene seed, hundreds of millions of thousands upon billions, however the hell many time it would take, until that gene seed was successfully reproduced 4 times to the point where it becomes near identical to the original gene seed, but secretly hiding the Genestealer curse in its blood. Again, from there, that Space Marine gene seed that is now successfully linked with Genestealer DNA is then sent back out into the Imperium. It wouldn't have to be much. It would simply have to be one Space Marine to one random chapter. When he would die, his gene seed would be taken, harvested, and spread into another battle brother. And from there, 1 would become 2, 2 would become 3, and so on and so on and so on. But Brad, that's just one chapter, I hear you say. It is indeed one chapter, but you forget that every single chapter is required by Imperial edict to give a tithe of its gene seed to the Imperium. That gene seed tithe will then be sent out into the Imperium. It will then go back to Terra to be hidden into the lunar vaults. From there, it will sit and it will wait and wait and wait until a founding must happen. Foundings happen whenever the High Lords decree, and with the recent advent of the Great Rift, Space Marines are needed more than ever, meaning that the likelihood of a founding has increased. From there, that Genestealer infected gene seed is then taken and given out to maybe one new chapter or multiple chapters, and from there the cycle would repeat, decade after decade after decade after decade, until eventually the entirety of the Adeptus Astartes gene seed, every single gene seed, would be infected with the Genestealer taint. And remember, Genestealers are their own unique thing that are completely and utterly separate from the hive mind. They have their own psychic thoughts, they have their own wishes, their own wants, their own desires, and the people who are infected by the Genestealer curse specifically do not know anything until the hive mind triggers that psychic call. Meaning that if the hive mind wanted to, it could not trigger that call until thousands of years later, when every single Space Marine is infected with the Genestealer gene seed. The hive mind would do that, because as we know, the hive mind is malicious. It hates us, and the only thing that it has more than hatred is patience. You simply wait and wait until the hive mind finally triggers its psychic call, and like that, every single patriarch associated with that gene seed, and more importantly, every single one associated with the patriarch, will be roused to act in the name of the four-armed emperor. And like that, every single Space Marine turns against the Imperium, and what was once its greatest bulwark is now the death of it all. For Space Marines are only getting stronger, there's only getting more of them, and possibly we might see the reformation of a legion soon. And again, to us this may sound utterly impossible, but I will remind each and every one of you, this is Warhammer 40k. No one is safe, nothing is sacred, and all it takes is for one set of gene seed, totally, wholly, and utterly corrupted by Genestealer taint, to make its way back to the hive mind. And when that happens, it's only a matter of time before every single Space Marine becomes a servant of the Great Devourer. Because while we built the Death Spectres and the Size of the Emperor, they were infected, they were purged, wholly and utterly. But then again, that's to our knowledge. Perhaps it's already begun. Perhaps one Genestealer did get away. Perhaps that new Primaris gene seed is not as safe as we think it is. Perhaps GW has already begun writing this. Perhaps in a few years there will be a cataclysm to end all cataclysms, and the end of the Imperium will not be by chaos, but by Genestealers. And to all of you scoffing at that and saying that will never happen, how many of you thought that we would get Primarchs back? How many of you thought that we would not just get one Primarch back, but sooner or later every single Primarch would return? How many of you thought that? How many of you scoffed at that? And now how many of you are waiting for Rogel Dawn, the Khan, Leman Russ and Vulcan to return? It's not a matter of if now, but a matter of when. So continue in your ignorance. Continue thinking that everything's alright. Continue thinking that you and your Space Marines are safe. Continue and wait. Because the impossible is always impossible until it happens. And sometimes all it takes is just a little bit of patience. After all, the best plan are those that are the generations in the making. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you guys think. I really like this whole theory. It's something that no one expects and would totally come out the left field. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but GW has become very safe with its writing and it's just kind of annoying. Like, this is supposed to be 40k. Anyone can fucking die. That's the whole point. So I'm like, you know, I like this because no one expects it. No one would expect it, but it makes an uncomfortable amount of sense. But let me know what you guys think down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3, Mr. Draw of the Void, and Mr. Curtis Studies. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sean IRL7, and Mr. Bullwin. Shout out to my Corporal tier members, Mr. Tremayo the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Miss Shauna Smithers, Mr. Gentle Salamander, and the Wench of Warhammer. And finally, certainly but not least, shout out to my awesome private tier members, Mr. Thomas Rose Lawns, Mr. Iva_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Aida, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortress Udom, Mr. CM Dine, Mr. Eric Mossero, and Mr. Dom Marek. Thank you, each and every one of you. I love you and appreciate you. The fact you guys do this makes this so incredibly worth it. I love you guys, man. Y'all are bloody amazing, and Yeah, I love you. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here and listening to my wacky shit. But sign up with a membership to get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access videos, how to make the channel, member-only exclusive content, and my love and support. But remember, this here will always be free. So give your boy $1 or not, I would love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Brelly 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. Yeah, I'm sure to say hello there, boys and girls. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. The first one to make a joke about Genestealer Uzi gets put in the hole.